Vikings, a people whose name brings to mind images of ruthless warriors with axes in hand, their cries echoing across the seas as they sail on their long ships. We are used to seeing them as unrelenting pirates, incapable of mercy, racing through foreign lands in their quest for conquest. But what if I told you that these infamous raiders were not just conquerors, but also masters of trade? What if I told you that without their prowess in commerce, their empire would never have survived? Yet behind their success lies a much darker side, a side of Viking trade that few dare to speak of. The Vikings were not only invaders, they were traders, but their trade was not limited to ordinary goods. No, beneath the surface of their thriving economy lay a grim reality, the trade of human beings, the slave trade. And that is something we need to talk about, because within these stories, not only was gold earned, but entire lives were destroyed. Picture this, the 9th century, the cold, snow-covered lands of Scandinavia, and the endless darkness of winter nights. Amid these frozen stretches of land, the black silhouettes of Viking longships emerge, long, sharp, dagger-like vessels. The Vikings sailed the harsh seas, not only to plunder, but also to trade. These ships carried more than just weapons and axes. They carried a commodity without which their world could not exist. They carried goods, yes, but they also carried something far more sinister. Through trade, the Vikings connected their destiny with the wider world. But their trade routes weren't just pathways to prosperity. They were roads that led to destruction. Slaves. The Vikings were not just conquerors of land, they were capturers of people. Not only in battle, but also in raids where entire villages were destroyed. People were taken and sold into slavery, becoming part of a vast trade network. How did this happen? The Vikings captured slaves as spoils of war. These people became part of a commerce that stretched from Scandinavia to the farthest corners of the known world. From the Baltic to the Middle East, from England to Africa, the Vikings supplied slaves, and in exchange they received gold, jewels, weapons, and luxury goods. Arabs, Persians, Franks, Slavs, they all bought slaves from the Vikings, becoming part of this dark commercial chain. But let's not forget, the Vikings, who themselves were once oppressed, did not think twice when it came to profit. They sold people, women, children, men. It didn't matter. To them, these were just commodities that brought wealth, not lives to be saved. Hundreds of thousands of people disappeared into the trade routes. This was the reality of Viking commerce, one built on the back of human suffering. But this wasn't the only dark aspect of their trading. The Vikings were not just slave traders. They were intermediaries in brutal trade networks that connected the distant corners of Europe, Asia, and Africa. They were the connecting link that determined the fates of entire nations. For them, it was just business. Survive in a brutal world, build their empire, and they did. But let's not think that these merchants were merely ruthless. Their trade was not only about gold and slaves, they were also the bridges between cultures. For instance, while they were engaging in brutal commerce, they were also exchanging knowledge, learning navigation skills from the Arabs and metallurgy from the Persians. They didn't just conquer lands, they traded ideas. But even with these cultural exchanges, we must remember, behind each transaction, behind each barter, there were still untold stories of pain, despair, and exploitation. Viking trade was not just an economic endeavor, it was a weapon. With it, they not only amassed wealth, but also secured their power. They understood that to build an empire, they needed more than just armies. They needed to supply their economy with goods and slaves. And they did just that. But their success wasn't accidental. It wasn't just a result of brutality. The Vikings became trading masters because they understood the value of not only weapons but also strategic thinking. They created trade networks connecting the East and the West, forging routes that placed them at the center of global commerce. These trade routes didn't just generate their wealth, they also ensured their long-lasting influence. So what truly lies behind the greatness of the Vikings? Behind every longship, behind every battle, behind every conquest, there lies a darker reality: violence, slavery, exploitation. The slave trade was their shadow, but it was also a necessary part of their civilization's rise. was a dark but crucial weapon in their arsenal. And in the end, we realized that the Vikings were not just bloodthirsty invaders. They were a complex, multifaceted people who played an essential role in world history. With their trade networks and incredible adaptability, they connected civilizations far and wide. But let's not forget, they did not achieve their greatness without their darker deeds. This dual nature, the light and the dark, is what defines the Vikings, a people whose impact on history remains indelible. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll uncover even more hidden stories and astonishing facts from the Viking world, the ones you haven't heard before.